Hey everybody, getting ready for already the third Sunday of Lent. Almost halfway through Lent then, because it's the sixth Sunday is Palm Sunday, and then you're already in Holy Week. But anyway, it's the third Sunday. Hope your Lent's going well. Whatever you're trying to do or not do during Lent, hope you're somewhat successful. Remember, it's not as succeeding as your faithfulness you try, but trying to come closer to be a better disciple. But I'd like to look at for a change, not the gospel, not even the first reading, but the second reading. It's from Paul's first letter to Corinthians, beginning at chapter 1. Brothers and sisters, Jews demand signs, and Greeks look for wisdom, but we proclaim Christ crucified. A stumbling block to Jews and foolishness to Gentiles, but to those who are called Jews and Greeks alike, Christ the power of God and the wisdom of God. For the foolishness of God is wiser than human wisdom, and the weakness of God is stronger than human strength. So he had a tough time. He's in Corinth. It's a port city. It's a Greek city. Sort of a big city, a diverse community. Every strata, the rich, the poor. And being a port city, many people came and went through that city and got to meet the stars, I guess you could say, whatever stars there may be, and the speakers and lecturers, thinkers. So like, let's say, almost like a New York City. And so Paul didn't have that. He wasn't educated the same way. They felt he wasn't good enough speaker, because they heard good speakers, and so they criticized him. And let's begin with the Jews. They were hard for him to accept his message of Christ. Well, let's face it. When you think of Messiah, preparing for someone who's going to come, the warrior, victorious, mighty, and then he's crucified on the cross. You know, the crucifix that we have in our churches or our homes, they're a sanitized version of what it would look like, all right? First and foremost, Jesus would have been stripped of his garments, and that's all garments. And so that alone is embarrassing. You know, you feel shameful. In that moment of his death, everything just opened up. And to look at that and say, what? That's the Messiah? That's the Son of God? In a way, you really can't blame them if you don't, if you didn't know better, as we are. How can that be, the Son of God on the cross? So it's one thing the Jews couldn't accept. And where is it here in the, excuse me, 1 minute here. In the book of Deuteronomy, it says, he that is hanged is cursed by God. So in their own scripture said it can't be possible, He that is hanged is accursed by God. Well, guess what? He's accursed by God. So that's why they struggled with that and couldn't, believe it. And the Jews also, further, they sought signs. We do too. And, someone's be special, you say, God, well, prove it, all right? And so when the golden age of God came, he looked for startling happenings. And in fact, when Paul was writing and speaking, there was a crop of false messiahs. All of them had beguiled the people into accepting them by promise of wonders, giving false hopes. In 45 AD, a man called Theudas had emerged. He had persuaded thousands of people to abandon their homes and follow him out to the Jordan by promising that at his word of command, mind you, the Jordan would divide and he would lead them dry shod across the Jordan. Needless to say, it didn't happen. And then later on in 54, a man from Egypt came to Jerusalem claiming to be the prophet. He persuaded 30,000 people to follow him out to Mount of Olives by promising that at his word of command, the walls of Jerusalem would fall down. Wow. I thought there was something, these sort of promises were something of a recent phenomenon, people predicting the end of the world, but even back then, 2,000 years ago. Anyway, so these were the things that Jews were, looking forward to. And then Jesus, who came meek and lowly, who in a sense avoided the spectacular, and he ended on the cross, they said, no, that can't be the Messiah, cannot be the Christ. So it was difficult for the Jews, particularly his crucifixion. And I mentioned the Greeks. They said the first characteristic of God was apatheia. And where we get apathy, but it's much, much more that. It means the inability to feel, that God is distant from us, that God doesn't feel our joy, our pain, or suffering. Oh no, God is incapable of feeling that. Nothing could affect him. Why? Because he's God. He's above. He's distant from us. And so a God who suffered, that contradicts that notion, that belief. Can't be. God is not like us. Anyway, he said it was insulting to involve God in human affairs. God, again, a necessity, was detached from us. I mean, in some ways we feel detached from politicians in their own way, you know? And at times there are certain church officials who almost feel detached, especially with the common person, right? You don't mingle, you don't connect. And so God will be the nth degree that you cannot, you know, connect to us either. And so we hear that the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. No, God would not do that. He is separate, he is distant from us. No, God would do that. And again, the Greeks sought wisdom, and they're known for their wisdom. And Paul, as well as he writes, did not have that clever mind thinking as the Greeks would have had, the persuasive rhetoric, you know, speaking. It seems that Paul was a great writer, but perhaps not the best of speakers. But what he spoke from his heart, from his conviction, and by the power of the Spirit. So he wasn't this great speaker. I remember there was a Jesuit author, John Powell. I used to read his books, enjoyed his books. He was a good writer as well. And one time, years ago, the summer, he went to this workshop. It was a week-long study, and he was one of the presenters. I said, wow, John Powell. I couldn't wait to go hear him speak. Well, he's a much better writer than speaker. I don't say I was disappointed, but I was surprised anyway. And so that's probably in some ways with St. Paul as well. They read his letters. It was powerful. It was strong, convincing, and then this is the one. And so they were also disappointed with him. Anyway, so that's understanding why the Greeks and the Jews could not accept Christ. But I'd like to leave in this note that the foolishness of God is wiser than human wisdom, and the weakness of God is stronger than human strength. And that's, you know, how we relate during this Lent. When we relate to God's suffering, that he died on the cross, that doesn't diminish our faith or eliminate our faith, but it draws us closer. Because now we feel like Christ knows what we went through, when we struggle, when we suffer, all right? He can relate to us, and we can relate to him. So in our own suffering, we look to the crucifix. Lord, you know what we're going through. You know pain. In fact, you're much worse than I am going through. So I turn to you for your grace and your help. So whatever you're going through, Christ understands, Christ knows, and Christ can relate to you. Keep going. Have a blessed Lent. Bye-bye.